It's time to unleash your inner beast as this mythical creature is breaking free from its ancient chains.
Stand up! Vanguard!
Hey Cardfighters, welcome back to another set review of VBT12 Divine Lightning Radiance. We already talked about the two main clans of this set being Angel Feathers and Gold Paladin, but this time we're going to dive in the different aspect of the Divine aspect of Divine Lightning Radiance, because we're going to tackle the brand new cards for Genesis. And this new support wave for Genesis is quite interesting and quite unique, because not only do we see support for Fenrir, we also see some new support for the Astral Poet playstyle, but surprisingly, this set also creates a brand new archetype that we've never seen before for Genesis. And we see some Regalia support to boot. So with that all said, let's jump straight into this set review and see what all these new cards for Genesis can provide for the clan, because there is a lot to go over and a lot to analyze. So of course we're gonna jump straight into the triggers and the reprints themselves, and they of course got two new reprinted critical triggers, and both of them are going to be a 1-star as a just generic reprints. In the same breath, they also got a new heal trigger that is Celpius of all healing, and this is going to be once again a 1-star because we already have a heal trigger for the clan. Now, they also got a new draw trigger, which is Witch of White Emperor Presemo, and this is going to be a 3-star as it's a new draw, but it also has a different working because of a new archetype where this card falls into, but we get to that in a moment. Now, of course, Genesis also got a new critical sentinel trigger like any other clan, and for them that's Stake Fetter Viti, and Saviti is obviously going to be a 5-star card as it opens up more options within the Sentinels as well as the critical lineup for the clan. Now, a new set also means a new starter, and this time they've got this starter, Incipient Longtail, and this is going to be once again a 1-star as a just generic starter, even though the artwork is kind of neat. In this set we also find a new vanilla card, which this time is the 15k shield grade 1 variant in the likes of Avier of Dedication. Now this card is once again a 1-star as it's just generic vanilla, and I do not like these type of cards. Now with that said, let's dive into a couple of generic cards which are pretty useful and to some extent also pretty powerful. And the first one that we're going to take a look at is this grade 1 Mythic Beast Hati. And Hati has the abilities continuous finger to Vanguard circle. During your turn, if cards were soul blessed for your card's cost this turn, this unit gets power plus 5k. So in most scenarios, this is going to be a 13k booster or attacker, which is pretty nice as it allows you to be a bit more aggressive. But its second ability is also pretty useful as it's auto Vanguard to Vanguard circle. When placed, soul charge 2. So it's a generic attacker or booster, and it gives you valid resources. So for that, I think it's a solid 3-star card as it works in any type of Genesis deck that relies on soul, which is basically every Genesis deck. Now another generic card, which in my honest opinion is extremely powerful, is this grade 2 Unappeasable Bitter Gleipnir. And its abilities are auto Vanguard to Vanguard circle. When placed, cost Counterblast 1, soul charge 1, choose a card from your soul and return it to your hand. So Gleipnir allows you to turn the soul into somewhat of a second hand, because every card in your soul can be placed within your hand. And yes, it costs you a counterblast, but it's effectively a +1, but it also doesn't lose you on soul quantity because it immediately creates a soul. So effectively, in value wise or in resources wise, this ability adds on top of your total resource count, which is really good, while also giving you access to another place within the game. So that in itself is a really powerful skill which any Genesis deck could benefit from. But on top of that, it also has a really solid rearguard circle skill, which is auto rearguard circle. When it attacks, cost Soul Blast 1, and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of turn. So this can become a 20k beater whenever it attacks, while also giving you access to your soul as a secondary place where your hand size is, which is really, really powerful. So because of the utility wise it provides to any Genesis deck, it's for me an obvious 5-star. And in premium it's even more insane, because this is basically the second coming of Wiseman, because this card has the same inherent combo nature as Wiseman, because every time it attacks, it Soul Blast a card, which can Soul Blast the stand trigger, which means this card restand, so you can do it again and restand again and do it again and restand again. But on top of that, this card gains power until the end of turn, so the power stacks every single time. So yeah, very powerful standard, very powerful in premium. Now, the last generic support card that we're going to tackle is, of course, the Great Researcher, which is Mythic Beast Skull. And its ability to gain extra power is continuous to Vanguard the Rearguard Circle during a turn. If cards were Soul Blessed for your cards cost this turn, this unit gets power plus 5k. So it's basically the exact same condition as Hati. So Hati and Skull both can become 13k attack or beaters the exact same moment. And it being the Great Researcher makes it, of course, an obvious 5-star card. Now, with those cards out of the way, let's dive into a surprising new archetype for Genesis, which are the Witches / Sorcerer archetype. And that came into existence purely because of this new Grade 3, which is White Rainbow Witch Piatru. And Piatru has the ability, act on Vanguard Circle once a turn. This ability's cost is reduced by Soul Blast 1 for each rearguard with Sorcerer or Witch in its card name you called this turn. Cost Soul Blast 13. Until the end of the turn, all of your units with Sorcerer or Witch in their card name get power plus 10k. And this unit gets critical plus 1. So I understand why they wanted to make it Soul Blast 13, because witches and number 13 is bad luck and that kind of stuff, but this is really, really bad, because it's effectively a weaker Soul Saver dragon, because it costs way more than Soul Saver and it gives way less power than Soul Saver. And even if you can reduce the cost, even if you call the entire board, that's only reducing it by 5. And because of her second ability, we can bounce back a unit and call it again. So it's 6, but then it's still Soul Blast 7 for just 10k power, while Soul Saver could Soul Blast 4 or 5 to give 5 units or 6 units 15k power. So it's a weaker Soul Saver dragon, while this card comes, what, 3 years after Soul Saver? That's not good enough. So this is really, really bad skill. But on top of it, we have Act on Vanguard Circle once per turn, cost count plus 1, and return one of your rearguards with Sorcerer or Witch in its card name to your hand. Now this skill is a lot better, and the reason for that this skill is a lot better is because a lot of the Sorcerer and Witch cards are pretty generic. They can be used in any Genesis deck, but most of them have unplaced skills, which we can use then multiple times. A very obvious interaction that can arise from this is Witch of Frogs Melissa, because then we can use that card a couple of times, and if we can generate the soul, which is actually pretty easy to do for witches, then we can actually make something happen here. So I don't think that her first ability is good at all. You're probably not going to use it, but her second ability to bounce back cards is probably her most positive aspect that this card has. So in total package, I cannot give this card more than 2 stars. Her first skill makes her obvious on 1 star, but just the fact that she can bounce back our Sorcerers or Witches gives us access to at least some value engine, which we can potentially build a deck around. So for that, I can at least give it a 2-star rating, and it can be a centerpiece to a new budget deck. Now, while we're on the topic of Witches and Sorcerer, let's dive into the new Witches and Sorcerer cards to have an understanding of what type of support this new archetype can work with. And the first one I'm going to tackle is this new Grade 2, which is Falling Star Sorcerer Fahin. And its abilities on a rearguard circle, when placed, cost discard a card from your hand, choose a normal unit from your soul, and return it to your hand. So, just like Kleipnir, it allows you to get access to your soul. The only difference is that it is a cycle as you ditch a card and get a card, but you do go -1 in your soul, meaning you will lose in some form of resources, which is not super ideal. But at least gives you access to your soul on a more consistent base. So for that, I think it's an okay 2-star card. There are better options, but it's not that outright terrible like some other cards. Now, another Grade 2 which is really interesting is White Phosphorus Sorcerer Revoluta. And Revoluta has the ability on a rearguard circle, when placed, cost counter plus 1, reveal the 3 cards from the top of your deck, put up to 1 card from among them into your hand, and put the rest into your soul. Now this is actually quite a powerful skill to some extent, as it's a +1, but you get to choose from a select top of 3, and the rest goes towards the soul. So for 1 counterblast, you go +1 in card advantage, and you go +2 on your soul, which can be utilized for other powerful skills. So that's actually pretty good. And of course, with the previous Sorcerer, we can then maybe get one of more of those cards into our hand if we discard other cards. So there are some interactions here where we can make our soul into a giant toolbox. So there are definitely multiple ways to use this card. And for that, I think it's a decent 3-star card, as you could splash it in any other Genesis deck if you want to have a bit more consistent access to specific key cards for your combo. Now, another witch that we've got, which is actually pretty powerful for the Witch Sorcerer archetype and could be very integral to a future upgrade to the engine, is this great one, Source Witch Pixies. And Pixies has the ability Auto Vanguard the Rigard Circle. This ability's cost may be paid with Soul as 1 if the grades of your and your opponent's Vanguard are the same. When placed, cost counterblast 1. Look at the 4 cards from the top of your deck, reveal up to 1 card with Sorcerer or Witch in its card name from among them, and put them into your hand. And put the rest on the bottom of your deck in any order. This is a searcher for the entire archetype, which allows you to search specific rearguard units that you want to use as combo pieces, but it can also be utilized as a right chain fixer, as it can search your grade 2 or your grade 3, which is really important for a archetype specific engine. Now, currently I don't rate this card as effective, as the engine itself is quite lackluster. But if we ever get much better support and actually a decent grade 2 and grade 3 lineup and a good boss unit, then this card might suddenly spike in value, as this is a really good consistency card for the entire engine. So for that, I think it's actually a solid 3-star card. Yes, it's very limited, but I do see potential in a card like this. Now, the final new card to this whole archetype is this grade 1 Assistant Sorcerer Comnis. And this is actually a pretty generic card, as its abilities are Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost put a card from your hand into the soul and draw a card. This is really good for Genesis, as it's basically a cycle that gives you advantage as you get more cards into your soul. But its second ability is Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, soul charge 1. Then if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, Soul charge 1, and one of your Vanguards get power plus 5k until the end of turn. So this card can give you at least 1 Soul in place, and in some cases even gets you 2 Soul and 5k power for free. This can work in any generic Genesis deck, so as it's similar in Soul charge capabilities as Hati, only the difference is that this can also potentially give you more power. So in some cases this could be better than Hati, in other cases it's not as good as Hati. So I think it's a generic overall solid 3-star card, as it's a decent Vanguard right target as well as a decent rearguard unit to call. And it also falls within the Sorcerer archetype, so they could potentially utilize this card twice in a single turn. So you can call this, get 2 soul, give 5k power to the Vanguard, counterblast, bounce it back, call it, gets 2 soul, give another 5k power to the Vanguard, and suddenly get some more value. That interaction and this with all the other Sorcerer cards is probably where the main gimmick of this new Sorcerer and Witches archetype will lie for in the meantime. Now, with that explained, let's dive into another 2-card combo, which are very generic, can work with any deck, but might become their own engine or own archetype once we get a bit more support in the near future. And what I'm referring to are the new Regalia units, and we're going to start off with our new grade 3, which is Cosmic Regalia CEO Yggdrasil. And Yggdrasil has the ability continuous Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. All of your rearguards with Divine Gauge get boost. Then if this unit is on a Vanguard Circle and it's your opponent's turn, those rearguards cannot be affected by anything of your opponent's cards. First of all, praise the heavens, we finally got gauge support again. So we might see some interaction with Artemis. Probably not, maybe the grade 2 Artemis, probably not the grade 3 Artemis, but it's really nice. But on top of that, this skill is insane. Yes, giving all your rearguards boost is neat and all, and will come up with the second card. But the fact that we can give our rearguards just pure immunity is insane. We hardly... I think this is the first time that we see if anything like this. I believe Gise did this to some extent, but that's like your final boss play that you're gonna do, so it's not that weird to think about. This is just a generic grade 3 that also can be used as a rearguard unit, which is pretty nuts if you think about it. So in certain circumstances, you just shut down an entire deck if they're reliant on retiring or binding your units, because Yggdrasil just says no to that. But then we get its second ability, which is Act on Vanguard the Rearguard Circle. Once a turn, cost counterblast 1. Search your deck for up to 1 Regalia Fate Norn, does the grade 2. call to the rearguard circle, shuffle your deck, choose up to 2 of your rearguards, and put up to 1 card each from your soul face down as a divine gauge for each of these units. So for 1 counterblast, you not only superior call a specific card from the deck, so you filter your deck, you can give 2 units divine gauges, which then gives them potential immunity because of a first effect. And because the grade 2 Artemis gets more and more power with every gauge it gets, you can even give that card a bigger power boost while advancing your game state, which is pretty powerful. And depending on if we get more Regalia support that works with the gauge system, then this could be even better and better and better. But for what we see with these 2-card combos and the previous support from 2 years ago, I think Cosmic Regalia CEO Yggdrasil is a solid 4-star card. Now, let's look at the grade 2 Regalia Fate Norn, because that card is actually even more insane than Yggdrasil. So here we have Regalia Fate Norn, and her abilities are act on Vanguard the rearguard circle once a turn, cost counterblast 1, draw a card, and choose one of your rearguards. You may put a card from your soul face down as a divine gauge for that unit. If you put a card, soul charge 2. This is once again a really powerful skill, because for 1 counterblast, you not only draw a card, which in itself is already decent enough, you can give any unit an equip gauge, so it can give herself the equip gauge, but if you already superior called her with Yggdrasil, it probably already have one, so you can give this gauge to any other unit, which then, if you sit on Yggdrasil, will get the immunity as well. But you can also give it just to the Artemis grade 2 to give it even another 10k power buff. But on top of that, it also gives you 2 soul, which gives you more shots for potential future gauges. So this card makes gauges, it gives fuel for gauges, and it gives you draw power for just 1 counterblast, and it's on an act ability, which you can use every single turn. Yeah, that's already really good. But the crazy part is, that's not the reason why she's really good. That's because of her second ability, which is Auto Rearguard Circle once a turn. At the end of the battle, it boosted a unit with Regalia in its card name. Discard a card from your hand, and on one of this unit's divine gauges, stand the unit that was boosted, and that unit gets power plus 10k, drive -1 until the end of turn. So it might sound weird that she needs a boost, but as you might have seen, Yggdrasil can give any unit with gauges boost, so Norn can be a booster. So once she boosts herself, because she has Regalia in her name, or more ideally, boost your Yggdrasil, then you can just discard a card and a divine gauge to restand that unit, and it gets extra power. And because it can restand Vanguards, it can give you a restandable Vanguard that still swings with a drive check, as they only lose 1 drive check. So that discard will be compensated for the next drive check that you generate. So that's already pretty damn good. But what's even crazier about this is that this doesn't have to be used on the Vanguard. So you can use her on a side column with an Yggdrasil and have a side column that swings twice. And because these are just 2 cards, like we've seen with Gold Paladin, with Percival and Aglaville, we can use this as a separate engine and put this in any other deck that we like that can maybe facilitate the room for these cards, so we can give Genesis access to a restandable column, so they always have access to 4 attacks and maybe even 5 attacks, which is crazy to think about. But it doesn't even stop there, because this already makes Norn incredibly powerful. But the fact that Norn just asked for a unit with Regalia in its name means that she will scale into the future with any future Regalia support. And hold and behold, we're going to get a brand new Regalia unit very, very soon with Regalia Angelica. And maybe that set will also introduce even more Regalia support. So Norn is going to be even better and better as time progresses. And of course, anybody that plays Premium is well aware what happens in Premium, as you can just restand any stride if you stride on top of a Regalia unit, which is nuts if you think about. So Regalia Fate Norn, for me, is an obvious 5-star card. This card is incredibly powerful. Now that we've seen all the generic support cards and the different sub-archetypes within this set, let's dive into the 2 main VR builds. And we're going to start off with the Astral Poet build, and instead of going over the VR first, we're going to immediately go into the support cards, because this new VR doesn't change the playstyle, it just builds on top of it, so you are well aware of how the deck functions. So for the first card this set provides, we have this grade 1, Recrux of Stratification, and its abilities are auto, When retired from the Guardian Circle, you may put this card into your soul. So this is something we've seen with the Harry engine, as it allows you to still be defensive while not directly losing out on value. Now in the Astral Poet deck, you won't be able to call them out to get more aggressive plays. But what this does for you is it allows you to have more grades in your soul, as you need to soul blast specific amounts of grades for you to open up the astral plane with the new Uranus. So this can help you to build towards it. But it also works in combination with the grade 2, because the new grade 2 needs to have this grade 1 into the soul to get full power. So in that case, even if you cannot write this one, you can still guard it beforehand to still have it into the soul. Now, we also have a second ability, which is really the reason why she's so good for this new engine. It says Auto Vanguard Circle, when placed, cost Soul Blast 1, and reveal an Astral Poet or Astral Deity from your hand. Search your deck for up to 1 Arcturus of Fervent Will, reveal it, and put it into your hand and shuffle your deck. That unit is the grade 2. So this grade 1 can search out your grade 2 right target if you can write her. So that means you can secure your right chain all the way up to grade 3, because you're most likely are going to have a grade 3, as you either need to reveal it with this skill or you're going to reveal Valkyrian. And because this deck is going to run a lot of grade 3s, your main priority is fixing your grade 1s and grade 2s. Having a grade 1 that immediately searches out the grade 2 is very important. But luckily for us, this grade 2 isn't only just here to be a superior right target, it also enables your engine. So with it all in mind, I think this card is a solid 3-star card. You might think to yourself, whoa, hold on chief, this should be more because it's so important for the engine, right? Well, yes and no, because after you've done a superior right chain, or you use 1 copy into the soul to get your thing, it becomes an effective dead card. And that's logical because you're going to revolve around grade 3s in the Astral Poet deck. But that is also the reason why it's not as useful for Genesis, because this thing only works in the Astral Poet deck. Outside of that, it's a complete waste of a card space. Now the grade 2 that synergizes with this grade 1 is Arcturus of Fervent Will, and she has the skills Continuous in Soul. This card gets grade +2. So once again, this synergizes with the interaction that I just discussed with the grade 1, that you need to soul blast specific grades, and it becoming then a grade 4 is really good, because that plus the grade 1 is a total of 5 grades, which is precisely enough to soul blast with Uranus. So that's actually pretty damn good, as it fulfills the entire condition with only 2 cards. But the main attraction lies in its second ability, which is Auto Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost counterblast 1, and reveal an Astral Poet or Astral Deity from your hand. Get an imaginary gift force, put that marker on your Vanguard Circle, and if the Crux of Stratification is in your soul, draw a card. So this is the reason why you want to have the grid 1 still in the soul, because it adds another layer of advantage you generate for that single counterblast. Now in most cases you're going to secure this right chain with the grid 1, so you're going to get this on place effects at least once, which allows you to get 1 extra imaginary gift force marker early on. This effectively is a Mutski that can be searched out, is cheaper, and can potentially give you more value because it also works in the Vanguard Circle. So this is incredibly powerful. The only downside is that this is more restrictive, unlike Mutski, which is super generic. This card can somewhat work outside of the Astral Poet deck if you run like 1 or 2 copies of the Triadic Uranus and try to combine these 2 cards together, but it's not ideal. But it's incredibly powerful in the Uranus Astral Poet deck, because it can keep generating markers very efficiently and very early on. So you could go into a grade 2 game and just pick Force 2, as you're going to generate more than enough in the following turns, and allows you to be very aggressive right at the get-go. As you also, of course, have the grade 1 Decay of Just Path that allows you to do this even faster and more consistently. So overall, I think it's a solid 4-star card, as it synergizes very nicely with the entire engine, and might have some use outside of that specific engine. Now, as the penultimate final to this whole engine, we of course have the new VR, which is Holy Heavenly Dragon, Eosanasis Dragon. And its abilities are Continuous on Vanguard Circle. If your Vanguard Circle has 5 or more force markers, your back row center Vanguard Circle becomes an Astral Plane. Only an Astral Deity can be on an Astral Plane. This is just the same skill that we've seen on most of the Astral Poet, unlike the newest Uranus that can create it a bit faster. So this isn't here to replace that Uranus. So why is it here? Well, that's because of the following 2 abilities. Auto Vanguard the Vanguard Circle. When placed, cost counterblast 1, search your deck for up to 1 Astral Deity, review it, and put it into your hand. Shuffle your deck. And if you put a card into your hand, get an imaginary gift force and put that marker on the Vanguard Circle. So this card allows you to directly search out your Valkyrian, increasing the consistency of the deck significantly. And because it's a rearguard circle skill as well, means you can just slam into the rearguard circle, do its ability, get Valkyrian, get the extra marker, and if you wrote into Verve and Will, that means you're gonna create your third marker, because you're probably gonna sit on the new Uranus, that creates a force marker on the right, so that's 3 markers. And you call this thing to the rearguard circle, which you want to do with the new Uranus, as you want to rest your Astral Poets. So it works completely perfectly in tandem with your Uranus plays, because it calls the rearguard to the circle, it fetches you your Valkyrian, and it creates your first force markers. So it's perfect. But that's not where this thing ends, because it also has a third skill, which is Auto Guardian Circle. When placed, cause discard an Astral Poet or Astral Deity from your hand, and one of your units cannot be hit until the end of the battle. This is another perfect guard. So Astral Deities can basically run 8 perfect guards beside the normal Sentinels, which is pretty insane, because this is a grade 3, which also could be searched out with your engine. So you have a searchable perfect guard that could be used in an offensive capability, because you can call to the field to search out the Valkyrian, create more force markers, and to set up your restand combo. So it works perfectly within the already existing engine, and because of that, we're going to rely on more grade 3s, because we want to run this, we want to run Uranus, we want to run the Trollic Uranus, probably at almost max capacity, and then we are probably going to rely on Decay Just Path to search this all out. And this is the reason why the grade 1 and the grade 2 that we just talked about are becoming so important, because we're sacrificing more and more spots for our grade 3s. So a consistency engine like those 2 cards are a much needed necessity. So this is an incredibly powerful card, and is obviously a 5-star card. Even though the engine doesn't change at all, just the existence of this card makes the Astral Poet deck that much consistent, as it searches out your main win condition, but that same card can also be your way to survive into your win condition, thanks to the added addition of these extra Sentinels, which is pretty good. Now, with that said, let's dive into the second VR, because this wasn't the only new addition for Genesis, as we also got the reintroduction of Fenrir. So here we have Mythic Beast Fenrir, and its abilities are act on Vanguard Circle once a turn, cost Soul Blast 1 or more cards, search your deck for up to 1 card with the same grade as the sum of the grades of this card Soul Blasted for this cost. Reveal it and put it into your hand, shuffle your deck, and call a card from your hand to the rearguard circle. So this is basically a searcher for your entire deck. Do you need a grade 1? You Soul Blast the grade 1. Do you need the grade 2? You Soul Blast the grade 2 or 2 grade 1s. Do you need a grade 3? You Soul Blast the grade 3 or you Soul Blast 3 grade 1s or a grade 2 and a grade 1. This effectively gives you access to your entire deck on demand whenever you need it. And you immediately call a card to the rearguard circle. That can be the same card you just searched out, but it doesn't have to be the case. So let's say you need a perfect guard because your opponent's going to do an infinite powerful play next turn and you need a perfect guard to survive. You can Soul Blast your starter, fetch the grade 0 draw PG, and then call a grade 2 or a grade 3. Or you want to be aggressive, you Soul Blast a grade 3, you search out the grade 3 we're going to talk about in a bit, which is your main attacker, and you can immediately set up your powerful plays. That is the power that Fenrir possesses in only his first skill. Such a skill should never be underestimated, because any card that allows you to tutor your entire deck is in some games immediately banned, because that's incredibly powerful. Now, this isn't the only thing that Fenrir does, because it also has extra abilities. Its second ability is Auto and Vanguard Circle. Once a turn, when your card is put from your soul into the drop zone, cost counter as 1, and call one of those cards to the rearguard circle. So if we have a certain cards into the soul, we can Soul Blast it and immediately call it out. We can synergize it with his first skill, so we can set up our entire board very efficiently. So for one counterless, we add a specific card. That's actually pretty nice, and it's decent in overall sense. But it's much better on first glance, because this skill synergizes with his third skill. Because his third skill is Auto and Vanguard Circle. When it attacks, cost Soul Blast 1, and this unit gets power plus 10k until the end of the turn. So the Vanguard becomes a 23k attacker, and you also have your force markers. So don't forget, numbers can even be higher. But this is an unattack Soul Blast skill, which is the same as we've seen with Gleipnir. So if we then synergize this with his second ability, we can, during the battle phase, Soul Blast the card, which we then can Superior Call for a counterblast during the battle phase, which gives us access to multi-attacks within Genesis. And we can fully control when we resolve this. So if we have a Gleipnir and a Fenrir to the field, we can decide for which Soul Blast skill we're actually going to resolve its Superior Call effect, depending on which unit we're going to call out or Soul Blast out with our effect. So Fenrir is a unit that can tutor our entire deck. It gives us access to multi-attack potential, and it can be a nice beater on its own. This is pretty good, but it becomes even better once we look at its specific grade 3 support card. So let's dive into that before we give Fenrir an actual rating. Now that specific support card is the evolved form of Fenrir, which is Mythical Destroyer Beast Vanagonder. And Vanagonder has the ability Auto Vanguard Rearguard Circle when placed, cost Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. So we got a consistent snipe, which is pretty decent in certain situations. But if this unit is on a Vanguard circle, choose all of your opponent's rearguards instead of one rearguard. So then it suddenly becomes a field nuke. Now this might sound incredibly powerful, and to some extent it is, but it's also very, very weak. Because that's all you're going to do that turn. You're going to Soul Blast 1, you destroy your opponent's field, and that's it. This card doesn't really do anything, and all the cards around it won't really combine or interact that well. So is that really what you want to do? Maybe, but with the current meta where a lot of clans can just make their field disappear, or they just don't care if their field is destroyed, this is relatively weak. Now, the reason why its single snipe is pretty decent is because it also has an access to its second ability, which is Auto Rearguard Circle. At the end of the battle it attacked a Vanguard, cost, put this unit into your soul. Look at the 3 cards on top of your deck, put 1 card from among them on the top of your deck, put 1 card from among them on the bottom of your deck, and put the rest into your soul. You sacrifice 1 card to potentially stack a card, remove a card to the bottom, and get 1 extra card into the soul. This is quite a good amount of manipulation to your deck, because you can stack the deck with triggers, you can put a specific combo card into the soul, and maybe a non-useful card to the bottom of the deck where you don't see it anymore for the rest of the game. But once we look at the interaction with Fenrir, then we certainly see the actual power potential of this card. Because what we can do is, we can right Fenrir, we Soul Blast our grade 2 and 1 right target to Superior Call Vanagonder, use the ability Soul Blast to snipe a unit, then after it's attacked, we can put it into the soul, we stack the deck, put another card into the soul, then we attack with Fenrir, we Soul Blast the Vanagonder, we then immediately Superior Call it once again to the field to have once again access to this beater, then we drive check our cards, and then we attack with the Vanagonder, and we could potentially use its skill again, so we put it into the soul, and then we can stack the deck again for defensive triggers next turn, and then once it's our next turn, we can Soul Blast the Vanagonder to search out another Vanagonder, and we can basically loop these cards over and over and over again, and whenever we need to, we can just Soul Blast to snipe a unit, and that soul cost is refunded every single time with Vanagonder himself, as he puts one of those 3 cards into the soul, meaning you have a contained engine of Fenrir and Vanagonder, which allows you to get snipes, multi-attacks, as well as deck manipulation, on top of already the power plays you do. And you can stack the force markers under the column underneath Vanagonder, which gives you access to multiple 23k beaters every single time. And if you can rewrite, that number will stack and stack and stack. So overall, Vanagonder, in my honest opinion, is a solid 4-star card. You might think 5-star, but the reason why it's a 4-star is that most of its value relies on Fenrir. This card itself is a field snipe, as well as a deck manipulation, which can give you soul. Sadly, this card doesn't draw you a card. If this card draws you instead of putting one of those to the bottom, it's an immediate 5-star card because it refunds itself. Now it doesn't refund itself, so you're reliant on Fenrir to refund the loss in value. But overall, in synergize wise, it can give you a lot of options and a lot of different plays. So that's why I think it's still a solid 4-star card, because it's also generic. It doesn't specifically rely on Fenrir, but without Fenrir, it's definitely a lot less potent. Now, with that said, let's go back to Fenrir and analyze the card as a whole. Now, we've seen its interaction with Vanagonder, which is incredibly powerful, but that's one of the options that Fenrir has. It can also, of course, synergize with Gleipnir to give you even more potential in powerful beaters, as what you can do with Vanagonder, you can do that to some extent with Gleipnir. But there are even more options, because Fenrir, as a complete tutor, can allow you to build a deck in many different ways, as you have consistent access to whatever card you play. And if you play some extra soul charge cards like Hati, you can fill the soul quite rapidly with enough targets that you can search out for any grade whenever you want for the entirety of the game, which is incredibly powerful used in the right hands. So for such an engine and for such a card that can allow you to do all this, I cannot give this card less than 5 stars. There's so much value to be had with Fenrir, and the only thing that it holds it back are the cards within the clan itself. Whenever we start to get even more powerful generic cards like Fenrir and Vanagonder and all the other cards, Fenrir as a boss unit will become stronger and stronger and stronger. There's no way that this card can stay in the same power level because it has access to the entire deck. So whenever we get a weird, wacky 2-card combo that might be a bit inconsistent, for Fenrir, it might as well be 100% consistent as he just gets to the cards. So yeah, very powerful and should definitely not be underestimated in whenever Genesis get even more support. And with that, we conclude the set review for Genesis, as we've seen a lot of interesting cards. Not only did we get the new Fenrir cards, we also got a new upgrade to the Astral Poet playstyle, but surprisingly, we even saw the creation of a brand new archetype with the Witches and Sorcerer archetype, and we also saw some Regalia support. So this Genesis support wave had a lot for any Genesis player out there, and I think a lot of players were very happy. Maybe some players weren't all too excited about the creation of the Sorcerer and Witches archetype, but it does create some budget alternative for players that don't really have a lot of budget to work with. And in the previous sets, the clan with 2 VRs usually didn't have any budget options available to them. And in this case, Genesis actually got a couple of options. They either can go with the Regalia Gauge playstyle, or they can go with the new Witches and Sorcerers archetype. And with that, let me know in the comments down below what you guys think of all the new cards Genesis got access to. I know the Sorcerer and Witches thing might be a bit on the tricky side for some players, but I want to know your honest opinion about those cards. Do you think there's a potential in them? As well as what do you think is going to happen with Regalia, with the brand new Regalia support right around the horizon? As well, do you agree with my sentiment about Fenrir, that he is an amazing boss unit and can potentially be a future staple for the clan? Let me know all your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below. This video has been brought to you by our lovely patrons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Time Leap, and I see you guys in the next one.